A lot of Democrats, starting with Chuck Schumer in his speech a couple weeks ago, but a lot of others as well, and some commentators seem to have feel like the sweet spot for them in responding to Israel's war in Gaza is to attack Benjamin Netanyahu personally and say the problem with this war and the reason that America and Israel are not on the same page about it is because of Netanyahu. That they love Israel, they support Israel. There is a good Israel that would be conducting this war in the way that America would like, but it's been hijacked by Benjamin Netanyahu and his right-wing government represents the bad Israel. Oh, I can see why that's a kind of politically appealing position for Democrats to be in because it refutes or it tries to refute the argument that they're anti-Israel, and it tries to suggest that they're Americans and Israelis are actually really on the same page about this war. Unfortunately, the evidence suggests that this is really not the case. The war is very popular among Israelis, Israeli Jews. Now, it's true that there's a deep division about whether to pause the war as part of a hostage deal. But even the people who want to pause the war as part of a hostage deal don't want to end it for good and certainly don't question the legitimacy of the war. Again, most Jewish Israelis. So that puts them in a different place from the Biden administration. In fact, even though Netanyahu has become much more unpopular since October 7th, the Israeli political mood has moved to the right. It's also not the case that there is a kind of majority of Israelis underneath Benjamin Netanyahu waiting to support a two-state solution if Netanyahu were to be gotten rid of. Again, Palestinian citizens of Israel may, but most Jewish Israelis, even before October 7th, weren't wild about a Palestinian state if one meant a sovereign state that controlled the Jordan Valley, that had a capital in East Jerusalem, a genuine state. The Netanyahu's main rivals, Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid, don't really support that kind of state. And again, that the opposition to a two states has even grown since October 7th. So this desire to suggest that the problem is Netanyahu is politically popular because Netanyahu is perceived in American circles as a right-wing or a Republican, someone who's been personally obnoxious to American presidents. But it's based on a kind of fiction about where Israeli politics are and what the kind of majority of Israelis actually believe. And also, I don't think it's going to be very effective in bringing down Netanyahu. Netanyahu doesn't, a public fight with an American president, a rhetorical fight, isn't necessarily undermining politically for Netanyahu. In many ways, he can actually use it to rally his base and to kind of call on nationalist sentiment. And it's particularly not an effective tactic if you want to bring down Netanyahu because it's only rhetorical. Netanyahu has a long history of embracing rhetorical battles with American presidents, going back to Bill Clinton and then Barack Obama over the Obama speech, for instance, calling for a Palestinian state near the 67 lines in 2011. If you wanted to actually try to undermine Netanyahu politically and increase the chances that Israel might shift course, you would actually have to condition or cut off military aid for the war and maybe change America's positions in the international institutions. The reason I think that would have a greater likelihood of success is that Netanyahu's really entire political career at some level has been based on telling Israelis they can have their cake and eat it too, that they can do whatever they want vis-a-vis the Palestinians, essentially destroy the possibility of a two-state solution in particular, and Israel will remain deeply integrated into the rest of the world. It won't face tangible consequences. Indeed, that it'll actually become more integrated into the rest of the world as it has been. So if you want to undermine that case that Netanyahu's making, you can't do it effectively simply by saying, we don't like Benjamin Netanyahu. Israelis felt well aware that previous Democratic presidents also didn't like Benjamin Netanyahu, but it doesn't cost them anything. The way to undermine Netanyahu's argument, at least with some sliver of maybe center or center-right Israelis, would be to show them that his policies are incurring tangible costs vis-a-vis Israel in terms of American weapons, in terms of America's support in international institutions. Again, I don't want to suggest that this would lead to some kind of left-wing peacenik Israeli government. There really isn't the basis for that politically, especially given that most Palestinian political parties, which are the most peacenik, the most anti-war, the most pro-two states, are not considered legitimate partners for an Israeli government. I'm talking about Balad and Hadash. in particular, but it would, I think, change the calculus in Israel politically in a way that simply saying that you don't want Netanyahu to be there doesn't at all. And so the Biden administration, I think, if it wants a change in government in Israel, the thing it has to do is take concrete actions to actually use the leverage it has vis-a-vis Israel and impose consequences. And if it doesn't, its anti-Netanyahu rhetoric, I think, is actually completely counterproductive and won't get the Biden administration what it wants, which is a different Israeli government.